Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode in the Run Breiter Podcast. My name is Sam Breiter, and I am joined with my co-host,
Colleen Mock.
And it's been a month since we've last done a podcast. We definitely talked about coming out with episodes every 2 weeks. It's been a little bit of a busier time with the holidays, but also Colleen recently dealt with a little bit of a medical incident. Great news is she's doing a lot better. I would even argue 100% or above that, 110%, because she is 10% better than anyone else. But yeah, Colleen, why don't you kick off by sharing with the audience, whatever you want to share about what you dealt with back a few weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you, by the way. You're very sweet.
Sure. Gotta start the episode off with a good note, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, like Sam said, a few weeks ago, I had this incident of what we guessed based off of talking with a few different doctors was likely due to an episode of low blood pressure. Following, I went out, I was running, I felt really good, felt really strong, went to the gym, did a workout, felt great, felt strong, went to the steam room, went to the sauna, and I ended up fainting twice shortly after exiting the sauna. And so it sounds like there's perhaps it was just like a freak accident related to low blood pressure, which can occur after being in the sauna. But, following up with a bunch of medical providers to make certain nothing else could be contributing. And yeah, fainting also resulted in me, busting my chin. I chipped a tooth, which I've had repaired, but I had a concussion, so that took me, I was down for the count for a little bit, and it was hard to even conceptualize the idea of talking coherently. So I appreciate everyone's understanding in advance on that. But yeah, it was a scary time. Still trying to figure out and rule out to make certain nothing else could be underlying or causing it to be a bigger issue in the future. But yeah, I'm just thankful for my health at this point.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story. It was definitely, equally scary for me as it was her. It worked out that we were at our local gym, Lifetime Fitness, which I do want to give a huge shout out to Lifetime. They're not a sponsor or anything like that, but as far as the staff and how they overall handled the situation, they definitely took it with the best in class type of approach. They were definitely very empathetic towards me and you and everything like that. So that's what you get when you invest a little bit more in a gym. I think, they definitely take these situations really serious. They have the right staff there that are prepared to help and take the right actions, right? So just a quick shout out there. But yeah, I was sitting in the massage chair. I got a call from Colleen, picked it up. It wasn't Colleen. Had a little bit of a, heart attack feeling, thinking that she was on a boat going to an island with her, someone else, and her friend called saying that we were done. I don't know why I thought that, but I literally, that's where my head went. And then when I heard that she had fainted, I ran probably 3-minute mile pace towards the front of Lifetime in socks across the wooden floor, and was definitely doing a lot of huffing and puffing while I was being, spoken to by the staff at the gym. And of course it worked out where it was a winter storm going on at night while all this went down. So the timing was perfect.
Thank
you know what? I'm just very thankful that you are okay. And, hopefully my goal for this episode, and I know you brought this up when we spoke before, is to discuss how sometimes life can get in the way and affect our running or fitness, and how to balance out these situations when they do come up, how to approach them and take the best action. And I also think this is a really good time to film the episode, as we're filming this on December 1st. The holiday season is here, right? You may have just finished Thanksgiving, but whatever you celebrate the rest of the year is coming up quick. And I think there's certainly a lot of challenges around the holidays as far as balancing running within your life too. So whether it is, you're dealing with an obstacle because of injury or it's a busy time in life, our goal is to provide a lot of value here in this episode today. So appreciate everyone joining. But I think, Colleen, I want to pass it over to you. Obviously, this incident happened a few weeks back. You're back in running and into your fitness, but do you mind kind of walking through kind of the practical steps, the days and even like week or two after this to kind of get back on your feet and get back into fitness while making sure you weren't overdoing it or risking another incident like this?
Yeah, I'll have to say it was incredibly frustrating. Like, the day that it happened was a day in which I had, like I said, I had done, one of the longest-ish runs post-Chicago. It was, multiple weeks out from Chicago at this point, and I had ran, 5 miles or something, which is a lot for a lot of people. But for me, that didn't, historically, that wouldn't really be that much. Mm-hmm. And then I did, a good workout, and I felt really strong. And so then having this happen on that day in which I had previously been yes, this is great, I can start getting back into fitness, as it were, pre-Chicago. And then to have this injury come, and then have a lot of questions of, is this indicative of something else? Is this indicative of a larger problem that could prevent me from running in the future, was really, really stressful. And it was hard, in the days after the injury, whenever I had a concussion, whenever my tooth, felt incredibly odd and was chipped, whenever my chin was just, this ridiculous swollen mass, with stitches in it. It was hard for me to, really remain optimistic with all of the unknowns. But it was something that, while it was hard, I leaned into trying to, focus on other things that I could do for self-care during that time. So, although we talk a lot about running, I have a lot of hobbies that I like to do that are not related to running. They're not related to fitness at all, that I like to lean on whenever I'm not feeling great. And so that's what I did. I did a lot more embroidery. I did a lot more bracelet making. Things that also don't really, put a lot of strain on your brain. There's some strain with the fine motor control there, but not a lot. Not a lot of, complex thinking. I obviously wasn't up, and you don't have to be super active to embroider. So I leaned on those hobbies whenever I was going through those initial few days, and then also worked towards coming up with a game plan of okay, this happened, so I need to follow up with a primary care provider. I need to follow up with a cardiologist. I need to follow up with X, Y, and Z. Made those appointments. Got those figured out. Then I was also thinking in ways of self-advocating as well. Okay, whenever I go to my primary care provider, I want to specifically say, hey, can you test, literally everything? Can you test vitamins? Can you test hormone levels? Can you test, my thyroid functioning? Anything that could possibly contribute to this, can you look into it? So that I was never going to come out of the doctor's office thinking, oh, I should have asked about this. So I tried to just really lean into hobbies that I could do that didn't require me to use a lot of cognitive functioning or a lot of physical resources either while I was recovering. And then I tried to problem solve or game plan as much as I could to be able to control what I could control going into those doctor's appointments.
Yeah. 2 top takeaways from this for me that hopefully this will give you some value as far as thinking through. Maybe you're dealing with an obstacle right now with running, or you want to be proactive and prepare in the case that maybe you end up having an obstacle. I think there are so many people who have a hard time when they get injured or they're not able to do their sport, whether it's running or soccer, football, whatever it might be, because you don't have those passions outside of that sport. You put so much into it, and it's your whole life surrounds it to the point where when you're not doing it, mentally you're in a tough place. Think of Olympians, right? We see that a lot with them, but I think that's just common even with everyday athletes, right? So I think whether it's embroidery or bracelet making, or it's, a collection, doing puzzles, playing games, whatever that might be for you that are not fitness related, having a passion kind of like at the ready in case something like this comes up, or having the creativity to know that you can think of something that'll help occupy you during these times, I think is critical. And like that's something like I truthfully have had a hard time, I think, the last couple years myself having, but I think like you've kind of inspired me to do more things outside of just like running and creating content that I can enjoy, that can keep me relaxed, not really thinking too much. And so I've been doing a little bit of that myself just to be proactive, right? So I think that's really good advice. I think the other thing that's super important here is being incredibly proactive if an incident like this does happen, about making quick moves towards getting the medical care that you need, and also coming to that medical care incredibly prepared. Because if you are just simply going to show up to a doctor's office and tell them what happens, and you're not really requesting additional testing, you're just like, hey, this happened, what should I do? I don't think you're going to have typically as much testing done as you obviously got, and something might, be left between the cracks. Obviously, it's a doctor's job, not your job, to understand like what you should and shouldn't be tested for. But at the end of the day, like, a doctor is running a business, and they don't always think about the patient first. And so you should always think of yourself first and ask the hard questions and come prepared to these visits. I think that's really, really important. I think a lot of doctors have been getting a little bit of a bad rep over the last couple of years, especially in the fitness community. People have been finding alternative ways to like hack their health and whatnot, but I think that there's ways to like just make sure you get the most out of the doctor's appointment rather than like doing all these other things. So I think that's really helpful advice, and I know like we're on the same page about that. Now this might be like a tough question, and I know you're not like a medical professional specifically for like your incident, but so let's take this question with like a little bit of like a grain of salt. But I think a lot of people have noticed that there have been a lot more people in the running space who have like passed out or fainted in the last few years than what we are used to seeing. I'm curious if you have like any hot takes as far as like why it feels like we're seeing more of this. Do you think that's an appropriate question?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that some of it can also just be like a coincidence, right? There's more people running, so then by nature there's going to be more people like having complications from running too. Mm-hmm. But something that I know from like my own experience is that like I am an incredibly salty sweater, for example.
Yeah.
So, like, whenever I got done running Chicago, I had, like, literal salt crystals, like, on my forehead. And, whenever I started, kind of, like, recovering from Chicago, I wasn't drinking as much, like, electrolytes or as much sodium, right? And so you could argue, especially since I started going into the sauna, the steam room, whatever it was, that I should have just continued to keep my electrolytes as they were during training, and just continue to hydrate a lot. And so maybe like sodium threw it off, right? But I think like if people are not aware of these things that could result in them feeling depleted, and for me, I know that I'm very sensitive to like electrolytes, it can result in, I think, more people having these complications if they're not aware that like, yeah, like I need like extra sodium, like I need more sodium than the person next to me. And again, I'm just leaning into this because like I know that I need more sodium than quite literally the person next to me, right?
Yeah.
And sodium also relates to blood pressure. So if you have higher sodium, it can artificially increase your blood pressure, which is something that I need considering I just had a low blood pressure event, right? But if you don't know that, like if you don't know that about yourself, that you sweat a lot, that you're very salty in your sweat, it can lead to more complications. I also think that there is an increased like trend for people to just like try and push themselves to the brink of exhaustion at like all times. And I think that for a number of people, it can be inspirational, but can also be detrimental for relatively new people in the sports arena. Yeah. So, like, there are plenty of professional athletes that can go and run, you know, a 10-mile long run the week after running, like, a crazy PR in the marathon. Because they're used to that high mileage, they're used to that high turnover, they have their nutrition dialed in, they have all this dialed in, and everything's good to go. But, you know, the average person who just, like, is a hobbyist, who's a really big sports enthusiast, does not have the same access to recovery, does not have the same access to nutritionists, coaches, all of these things. And I think that the message that they often get is to, you know, return really quickly to like pretty heavy mileage shortly after a marathon, and also to just like push, you know, if you know, no pain, no gain, right? Like, who's gonna carry the boat, stay hard, all these things. And I think that there's a time and a place to push yourself, but then there's also a time and a place to listen to your body and take a break. And you know, I know that on the day that I fainted, it was probably like the strongest, heaviest like workout day that I had since the marathon, but I felt really strong doing it, right? Like, I wasn't feeling like, oh my God, I'm overdoing this. But, you know, they also thought that it was a freak accident that occurred afterwards. So I think that there's also just benefit in finding balance between pushing yourself and then listening to yourself to recover.
Yeah, for sure. And, like, yours didn't happen during a competition,
No.
right? We have seen this year specifically, like, I know many people in my, like, personal life that I've, like, gotten to know at different points, or just people from afar that I've also just, like, followed their journeys who have fainted. But, yeah, I think, like, it's the people that are fainting, like, during a competition, or the people who have, like, a very high heart rate during a race, who are pushing towards really hard goals, who are not feeling good the day before a performance and still choose to treat that performance very hard compared to, like, what is reality for them. You know, I'm someone who's definitely suspect of trying to push myself to my limits. I thankfully, knock on wood, I don't have any wood here, but I'll give myself a little pound on the hand. I've never fainted from running, but I've definitely had moments where I felt dizzy out of it, and that's been a concern for me. And I've listened to my body and slowed down, started walking, took a break, slowed my pace, all those things. And so this isn't meant to talk anyone out of, like, fighting for a goal. That's not the goal of this conversation, but it's to build awareness of, hey, like, this is possible. Don't overthink it, right? If you're feeling good when you're running, I don't think it's healthy to worry about fainting. However, just know that, you know, it's okay to slow down once in a while if you're feeling off, to take additional rest days. You don't need to run every single day. You don't need to do a race every single week. You might see a lot of people doing that, but that doesn't mean that you need to do that. And I think that's kind of my whole point. I have personally, since Chicago, my training volume has been the lowest that it's been after a race, or just like in general in quite some time. I've been running 10 to 15 miles a week, but I'm progressively increasing my mileage. I'm doing other cross training, and a lot of that is just because, like, I was feeling burnt out with running, and who knows, like, psychological things can result in physical effects. And so I'm trying to just make my way slowly back there. And so it's okay to do that. I think as long as, like, you know, you don't fall away from the sport or build bad outside habits, but it's okay to like not do everything right now. The goals will come, and it's your journey, not what you're scrolling and seeing. We see a lot of motivation that's great, but you don't have to follow what everyone else is always doing. So that's just the point there on balance.
Yeah. Yeah, and, to reiterate, like, my fainting, again, was not, during running. It was actually whenever I was doing, like, a recovery thing. And so I think, like, with that being said, whenever I did do the turkey trot and I ran hard during the turkey trot, there were moments where I was like, oh, like my head kind of feels weird, like, oh no, what if I'm going to faint again? And I had like this like intrusive like anxiety thought of like, this is not good, like I don't want to have this occur, I don't want to have like another setback. And so what I did was I just slowed down a little bit, not even a lot, like I still set a flat course PR in the 5K, and thank you, and I still like was able to listen to my body and succeed. So I think that there's like balance in it, and you can still succeed, you can still reach your goals, you can still exceed your goals by listening to your body. But if I had like continued to push myself, or if I had tried to run through it, who knows what could have happened. I probably would not have fainted, but I could have felt incredibly sick. I could have felt really bad. My anxiety could have peaked a lot. Who knows? But like finding that balance, going with it is just super important.
Totally. Well, I appreciate, again, you sharing everything about your journey, and, looking ahead, it seems like good times coming for you, and, whatever you sign up for next, I know, like, waiting for some things to come through, but excited to see you continue with the sport and do whatever is meaningful to you with everything, in mind that happened, right? But I think we should shift to the topic of the holidays. We're all really excited to spend some time with family and friends and gift give and all that. I got a good gift coming for Colleen this holiday season that I think she's going to really like. But I guess let's talk about balancing running with potential travel, spending time in, that can be busy on the weekends compared to what we're used to, or even the weekdays, and maybe not being in like your perfect routine, perfect environment, and how to continue going during this season and finishing off the year strong, really. Any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think there are a lot of ways to approach it, which are positive. There are also a lot of ways that can be incredibly negative, but we're going to focus on the positive ones today.
Sure.
I think, like, first and foremost, going in with the, perspective of, like, self-empathy, and also recognizing that, like, seasons of life change, right? So if you're trying to maintain, like, a running habit, continue to run, as often as you can, but cut your mileage down as much as need be to fit into your busy schedule, right? So that you're still in the habit of running, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever it is, but drastically cut back your mileage for December if you need to, with travel and all these things, travel, weather, whatever it is. And another thing that I think can also happen is to just recognize that, like, it's temporal. It's not going to be this way forever, right? The holiday season is not about, like, fitness, right? It's about family. It's about, gratitude. It's about spending time with those that you love. And so if you need to dial down the fitness and dial up all those other aspects of your life, that's okay too. And then whenever January, February, whenever the time settles where you're dialing down all of your other duties, you can dial back up in your fitness routine. Things don't have to be the same all year. And so I think, like, leaning into whatever you can during that season of life that you're granted is fantastic. And then if you're worried about, falling out of having running as part of your life broadly, just try and sneak in, like, those quick little half mile, 1 mile, 2 mile, whatever it is, on the same schedule, just so that you're still used to getting up, moving, clearing your brain, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. From my side, the way I look at it is this. There's big race seasons that we see, Normally that's the fall and that's the spring. The summer and the winter are a little shaky. Yes, it's oftentimes because of the weather, but it's also because these are busier times of the year where people might be spending that time with their family or doing traveling, right? I think those are big times of year for that. And like Colleen said, having some empathy and understanding that it's okay to have December be a season of less structure and more enjoyment. And I think that's a big reason why we see January, all these big goals coming, people getting back to, the trails, or we see the gyms being super, super crowded. So it's okay to give yourself that balance. But I do think also on the other end of the spectrum, if let's say you have a big race that you're training for in January, or you have a big race coming in 2025 and your training is beginning now and you want to continue fighting through that training, but you view like the week of Christmas as a challenging week for you. The way I think you approach it is the way you approach any other busy week, whether you have work or whatever. It's just finding a way to get in your run, simply, right? And maybe that's waking up early. Maybe that is speaking up for yourself and giving yourself a boundary and saying, hey, I need an hour. What is the best time of the day for me to go and do this? Maybe it is bringing your recovery equipment and checking a bag if you're flying on a plane instead of, doing a carry-on and leaving that stuff at home if you're needing those things, right? Maybe it's when you're at the airport, walking around a bit more at the airport to get a little bit of cross-training in, and when you're on the plane, doing some stretching on the flight so this way your muscles don't get too tight, and then next day you can get out there and have a really successful run and not feeling inflamed or out of like your body rhythm due to sitting on a plane for multiple hours, right? There's a lot of things that you can do to better it. I think it all comes to organization and having a plan, right? If you're leaving for Christmas on, let's say, December 24th, and, Christmas Eve, and you're going to be gone until New Year's Day, right? Well, maybe a week before, start thinking about that, planning in when you can get those runs and communicating that with your family, but also prioritizing the important time that the folks around you want to cherish and enjoy, right? And so regardless of what you celebrate, I think like this can be helpful advice. This is helpful year round, right? We all have obstacles that pop up, but I think it really just comes down to advocating for yourself. And, I think when it comes to like food, for example, that's something that can also be like a huge, huge challenge, right? I know like I struggle when there's a lot of cookies out or things that might be just like higher in calories, such as like fattier meats or sides. I love eating those things, right? But like maybe that's like a time of year where I'm not saying you should necessarily be like counting your calories. I don't fully think that that's the best thing you should do as a runner, but like you're a little bit more thoughtful about the way that you're eating. Maybe instead of 5 cookies in a day, maybe it's 1 cookie. Maybe instead of filling up your plate 3 times, you fill up 1 good plate that is like a comfortable meal for you. You don't have to end the night full. You don't have to use it as a time where you're going to like go all out and drink as much as you can because during your marathon build, you weren't drinking that much, right? You can still put in healthy habits. And yes, it's not going to be your full routine, but not everything always goes as expected. Think of a race. You might be expecting to run in 30-degree temperature and have a really comfortable race. Next thing you know, it's 75 degrees, it's windy out, and there's air pollution, right? Are you not going to run that race? No, you're probably going to run it, but maybe you have a little bit of a different plan than you had originally. The same thing goes when you go into the holidays. Any like other thoughts from you now that I kind of mentioned a lot of things there?
Yeah, I think something else that I'm thinking is that like there are so many holiday themed like runs that you can sign up for and do too. And it doesn't have to be like a race that is like, I'm going to do the quickest, like I'm going to do this massive build, I'm going to train really hard, all these things. It can just be like a fun run with people. even, trying to share the hobby with someone who isn't totally used to it. Whenever we go back to my hometown, Sam and I are going to do a 5K with my mom. My mom's been training to do like a walk, jog, run-ish sort of like 5K. So it would be walking a few minutes, jogging or running, depending on how she feels, for a couple of minutes, and then going back to walking for a few minutes and just cycling that through until we get to the 5K mark. And that's something that, I brought up with her, like, hey, would you want to do this? We can do it together. We can do a virtual one. It'll be fun, something new. And that was a way for us to talk about, like, hey, we are also going to, like, incorporate a fun fitness activity while we're there. And I think that that's something that you can do in a lot of cities. A lot of cities have, like, the hot chocolate runs. Turkey trots are everywhere. We did one on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Wherever it is, I think that that's something that's fun to do too, is just sign up for a race, because then you'll be in the race atmosphere. You can probably get like some friends to do it, some family members, and just get a little movement going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many good races this time of year that are like meant to be like family events.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like, you don't know unless you ask. You might have people in your family that you look at and you're like, oh, these people would never run a race. But then you ask and you might get more buy-in than you realize, right? And I think the benefit, too, is when you do travel for the holidays, is that you can go and explore an area that you haven't ran before, right? Whether it's a small town or a big city, there's places to run anywhere in the world, in my opinion. You can find somewhere where you can run, even if that's on a treadmill, right? But like, most likely, if you're listening, and there's going to be a cool trail, a good path, a fun park, right, that you haven't seen, and you can have running as an excuse to see that, right? And maybe you get some people to come along for the ride, and they go on a bicycle, or drive their car around while you're running. Who knows? But like, it all starts with kind of acknowledging that you want to do it, expressing it, and it might be an independent journey, or you might get some folks to tag along, right? So, we're like I said, we're filming this episode on December 1st. It's the last month of the year. I'm always super big about finishing the year strong, going into the following year with a ton of momentum. And when I say finish the year strong, that doesn't mean that it has to be like an all-out effort and, my largest mileage month of the year was 200 miles. I'm going to do 300 in December. No, but it's more of just continuing the habits that you had, not fully putting the full brake on, but like being the best version of yourself, whether that's being a great family member for the holidays and being present, giving presents, right? We like doing that. Maybe that's focusing on your mental health and fixing up some things that have been a struggle, right? Maybe you're having a hard time sleeping. Well, what can you do to help your sleep? Maybe it is like having a little bit of an increase in mileage if you've been running a lot, or maybe you want to focus on some additional speed work if you feel like, my mileage is high, I don't want to run this much, but maybe I want to get like a little bit faster and stronger, incorporating some speed work and some strength work. Like, that's something I'm focused on right now. So you have the freedom to decide, and you don't always have to even make a decision. Sometimes you can just use this time of the year to try out a lot of different things and see what you're passionate about for next year. But I think, that's the cool thing about life. You can always change things and do what you want, right? To the best of your ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Any like other topics that you think are relevant on this balance, especially during the holidays, and injury type issues that might come up, podcasts that we're filming here, Colleen?
I think some final thoughts that I have just with regard to balance too is that it takes a lot more time to lose fitness and endurance than it takes a lot longer time to lose it than it does to gain it. So you can quickly return to your whatever fitness level you were at. And so you might feel like you're losing fitness rapidly. You're not. it takes a lot longer to lose your fitness. And so I think that's something that I like to keep in mind too. But also when it comes to eating, we've talked a lot about balancing with regard to working out. But there's a lot of balance that can be had with eating too, right? Just because you filled up your plate doesn't mean you have to eat all of it. Just because maybe you ate a little bit more than you wanted to on one day doesn't mean that like your entire holiday season eating is off the rails. And you don't have to work out, to counteract what you ate either, right? Like food is fuel. Even if you ate a little bit more than you wanted to on a certain day, that doesn't mean you have to starve yourself the next day. Balance is really important. Self-compassion, self-empathy, super important not only with fitness, but also your fueling habits as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the advice, Colleen. And, I appreciate everyone listening in. I know this time of year can be very stressful, fun, and busy, but your, listening time means so much to the two of us. So thank you so much for tuning into the episode. Friends, if you are looking to sign up for a race or get into running for the first time, or you have a goal that you want to go after that is new or one that you've struggled to hit and you need running tips or advice, appreciate you checking out my channels. Run Breiter. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and of course we have this podcast. But also, if you want to really focus in on some of those accomplishments that I mentioned, and you don't feel like you have the support that you need, and videos online aren't doing the trick, and you need more of that one-on-one, personalized, customized coaching, as a reminder, I do offer coaching plans and definitely have a few open spots available for folks who might need it. So feel free to reach out to me directly for that. You can go to my website, which is runbreiter.com. That's RunBreiter.com, and fill out the free running consultation form. And I will provide as much help as I can, whether that is digitally, if you're on the other side of the world, or if you're local in Denver and you need someone to be there and run with you. I'm more than happy to see what I can do and accommodate that. But that's all I got. Anything else from you, Colleen?
Don't forget to run brighter.
I was hoping you'd say that. Yes, friends. Don't forget to run brighter. See you again on the next one here real soon.
Bye.